Everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 7-game MLB DFS slate for today on DraftKings. A little bit of a wacky slate. It does start at 4 o'clock, which is 3 hours earlier than usual. And then we have 3 games that are also double headers as well. So it's going to be a little bit of a wacky slate here, but we'll try to talk our way through it. And I do apologize for not posting a video yesterday, but it was NFL Sunday and I figured like 7 people would watch the video. And that might be the case once again because we do have a double header tonight for Monday Night Football. So I imagine most people's focus is going to be on building NFL DFS lineups tonight, which I totally get. But if you happen to be playing MLB DFS today, I thought I would record this video for you guys. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. And we're all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players. Although the season is almost over, we have a couple of weeks left for the regular season, so I guess I won't be here too much longer. But I do cover other sports as well, including NASCAR, which you might think since it's the playoffs, it's coming down to the very end. But we run till like mid-November for the most part, so we still have quite a while to go for NASCAR. And then I cover NFL as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you're following me on social media, my handles are in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you miss more content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We have 300 plus people. You can hop into the Discord chat or just get access to all the extra content that I put out, including my spreadsheet. So if you're interested, links down below. If not, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So I have 2 viable pitching options, and really everybody else was kind of just or no way I'm playing them. So I'm going to start here with Trevor Bauer, who is just by far the best pitching option on this slate. He's been one of the best pitchers for DFS purposes this season. Like if we just take a stroll through the game log, 36, 36, 36, 40, 16, 12, those are kind of in games, but then 20 and 38. And with this being only a 7-inning game, there's a very solid chance he can get us a complete game, which I believe is, 4 points on DraftKings? I think that's what it is, but last time it was a doubleheader and there was only 7 innings. He did face the Kansas City Royals on August 19th, and he did get the complete game because he went 7 innings and scored 40 DraftKings points. So I think there's a good chance Trevor Bauer goes 7 innings. He has the longest leash in the entire league. He's well over 100 pitches in almost every single start. There's only been 1 start this season. He's not over 100 pitches, and he threw 97 pitches, and that was versus the Royals in that doubleheader game where he only went 7 innings because he could only go 7 innings. So if it wasn't for that, we know he'd be going over 100 pitches every single start this season. The strikeouts have been there, and this is an elite matchup here versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, if we just take a look at their numbers this season versus right-handed pitching, it's been pretty horrendous. 25.6% K rate, only a 6% walk rate, a 112 ISO, a 200 batting average, and a 53 WRC+. They've just been absolutely awful versus right-handed pitching, and they draw one of the toughest matchups in the league here. If we're looking at Bauer's numbers this year, a 36% K rate, a very, very nice 1.74 ERA. Now his xFIP's at 3.31, but that's still really good numbers. A 7%. If he had a 7% strikeout rate, we'd have a problem. But only a 7% walk rate and only 1.05 home runs per 9 innings with a 29% hard contact rate. So Trevor Bauer is an elite option. I don't see how you don't play him on this slate. And only 2.3 runs for the Pittsburgh Pirates in this one. And keep in mind, there's going to be some numbers here that look red, but these are not bad numbers. It's only comparing Trevor Bauer and Jesus Luzardo here. So don't put any stock into you seeing red numbers. These guys are both very solid pitchers, and Trevor Bauer being one of the better pitchers in all of baseball. Then our SP2 is Luzardo here at 8,300. There's really just no one else I like on this slate for the most part, so I think the logical pairing is going to be Trevor Bauer and Luzardo, and I expect them to be very, very heavy chalk, as I would expect most people to go with this pairing, as it seems the most obvious. And this game is also a doubleheader, so there is the off chance that Luzardo, if he goes 7 innings, could potentially get us a complete game as well, which, yeah, I'm not totally sure, but I think it's like 4 or 5 points for getting a complete game over on DraftKings. But anyway, Luzardo here, he is fine. He's coming off a really solid start versus Houston, which was actually his second best DFS performance of the season. He went 7 innings on 100 pitches, which is the longest he's went all year, and 7 strikeouts as well. And he's having a pretty solid season for the most part. He's had a couple of down games, but for the most part, he's been a pretty solid pitcher. A 3.74 xFIP, a 24% K rate with an 8% walk rate, and only a 29% hard contact rate as well, with a lot of ground balls. And this is a pretty good matchup as a lefty versus Seattle Mariners. Now, they have a lot of righties in their lineup, but overall, they still struggle versus left-handed pitching with a 27.5% K rate, 9% walk rate, 128 team ISO, 186 batting average, and a 63 WRC+. So Bauer, Luzardo here are the 2 best options on this slate, and if I'm playing cash games, these are the only 2 options that I'm going to consider. And with that being said, I think we can move on to the bats now at this point. And if it loads. Okay, so the Braves, they are going to be the absolute chalk on the slate, but the problem is they are super expensive, but fortunately we do have plenty of value on this slate, so I definitely think we can spend up for quite a few Braves bats, but we will have to fish for some value, but it can be done for sure. But I only have one catcher here. Now, if you can't fit d'Arnaud, I understand that. Just play whoever fits at catcher, but there was no one that stood out to me. So if you got the money for d'Arnaud, I like him the most. He's 4,700. He's fine versus lefties. He's fine versus righties. But the Braves should be able to tee up here versus Jorge Lopez, and this is one of the few games that are actually going a full 9 innings, which is obviously going to be a boost to the bats. The games that are only going 7 innings is obviously going to limit the offensive potential that they have. Yeah, totally like the Braves here. They have the highest team total on the slate at 5.63. They're also in Camden Yards, which is great for hitting, and you get the guaranteed 9th inning at-bats as well. They're on the road. Now, if you're looking at d'Arnaud's splits versus lefties this season, I mean, there's really nothing there. But if you look at his splits versus righties, pretty darn good. 360 batting average, a 283 ISO, and a 450 WOBA. And Jorge Lopez is just not a very good pitcher. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. And if you're looking at versus righties this season, he's going at 11% strikeout rate. The strikeouts actually have been a little bit up versus lefties, but overall, this guy is just not a very good pitcher. And the Braves offense is loaded with studs. You got Freddie Freeman, Travis d'Arnaud, Marcell Ozuna, even Ozzie Albies is back. And I don't know if I mentioned Acuna yet, but and some other guys as well. So the Braves should be able to tee off here for the most part, and they are by far the best offense on this slate. Speaking of the Braves, going down to first base, we have Freddie Freeman at 5,500. He is a core play for me in all formats, and I'd be hard-pressed to make a lineup without him in cash games. He crushes right-handed pitching. Lopez is not very good versus lefties. And we're in Camden Yards, and the Braves are the best offense on these slates. So Freddie Freeman makes a ton of sense here. This season, a 357 batting average to righties, only a 12% carry over a 700 slugging, 202 WRC plus, and a 480 WOBA, and a 357 ISO as well. So I don't think it really needs to go too much farther than that. Freddie Freeman is an excellent play on this slate. He's super expensive, but if there's one guy I'm spending up, it's going to be for Freddie Freeman. Then Renato Nunez at 3,900 here. On Touki Toussaint, he can be a little up or down here. For the most part, he's kind of been down, and he really isn't that great of a pitcher. He's really struggled with lefties this season, but I still think we can use pretty much all the Orioles here. Now, I wouldn't say I love the Orioles. They only have a team total of 4.37 here, but you know, they got some decent cheap options, which I do think they are stackable, especially in tournaments, and they have a couple of cheap guys that I think are viable in cash games as well. If we're looking at Nunez's splits here, he's actually been a bit better versus the righties, so I actually don't mind that reverse splits matchup here. He's got a 261 ISO versus righties, 515 slugging, batting averages at 254 and a 33% K rate, but like Toussaint's just not a guy I'm going to be too scared of. Now, he's tougher versus the righties, there's no denying that. 30% strikeout rate, and their WOBA's at 350. Now, to lefties, for over a 400 WOBA and only a 20, well, I say only, but a 24% K rate with a 16% walk rate and a lot of fly balls as well. But I think you can stack the O's here. Toussaint's not going to scare me too much, and they can certainly struggle at times. So I think the O's are certainly viable, although they're probably better reserved for tournaments, except for a couple of guys, which I will mention in a little bit. Then Jesus Aguilar here at 3,800. I also think they're viable in tournaments because Vince Velasquez, he can definitely flash his upside, but there's games where he just looks absolutely awful. So I definitely don't mind using some of these Miami Marlins bats, although I'm not like going overboard on them. My favorite options are going to be Corey Dickerson and Matt Joyce, but some of these righties here, like Jesus Aguilar, is fine. If you're looking at his splits this season, they've kind of been somewhat similar to either side of the plate. A little bit better in the average department to lefties, and the strikeout rate's only 16% to lefties, but he's really not striking out all that much either to righties either, and he's got some decent numbers. So I think he's fine if you are stacking against Velasquez. And if you're looking at Velasquez splits this season, he's giving me over a 400 WOBA to righties, and look, he gives up power to both sides of the plate as well. But he does have a 33.3% K rate to righties, which is obviously concerning, so I'm going to prefer the lefties here. But I think the entire lineup isn't playing in case he has one of those games where he just gets blown up. Although I will say the park's not great for bats in Miami. Then going down to second base, we have Ozzie Albies at 4,400. Going to be hitting near the bottom of the order, but I like the entire Braves lineup here, and I think if that's just going to keep him lower owned, all the better for tournaments. Now, we don't have much numbers on Albies this season because he's been injured for most of the entire season, but we know the guy's got plenty of upside, and he's obviously has streaks where he looks absolutely amazing, so I think he's certainly viable in Brave stacks. And then the rest of second base just is not very strong today. Like I have Marvin Gonzalez and Jazz Chisholm, but even then they don't get me too excited. So I think you're probably just going to play Albies. But if you can't get up to him, Marwin's fine at 3,300. The Twins are one of the better stacks on the slate going up against Dylan Cease. And actually, if we're looking at Dylan Cease's numbers this season, let me see if I can pull it up because his ERA is pretty good this year. But if you're looking at the xFIP, on the pitcher status sheet here, so Dylan Cease 8,400, So looking at his numbers this year, he's got a pretty good 3.3 ERA, but his xFIP all the way near almost 6 and only a 15% strikeout rate with a 10% walk rate. So I definitely think the Twins are stackable, and Dylan Cease's luck's bound to run out at some point here. Now I think he's a okay pitcher with upside, but look, he definitely gives up power to both sides of the plate here. He's got a decent strikeout rate to righties, but I think we can use the entire Twins lineup. But, Marwin Gonzalez will be a lefty here because he's a switch hitter. And if you're looking at his numbers versus righties this season, it's not going to be too impressive, but I think we can certainly use lefties versus Cease here. And then Jazz, we don't have any numbers to look at for him, so I'm not even going to pull them up, but I think he's a fine option in a lefty on righty matchup here versus Vince. And if I'm going to use anybody versus Vince, I prefer the lefties for the most part, but he will give up power to both sides of the plate. It's just the strikeout rate versus righties is enough to kind of scare me off of some of those guys. Then going down to third base, Austin Riley at 4,500. If you are on the Atlanta Braves tonight, I pretty much have you on the spreadsheet. I'm not sure if I missed anybody, but I like the entire lineup for the most part. If you're looking at Riley splits this season versus righties, he's only got a 28% ground ball rate, so he's keeping the ball in the air, which I do like. But 100 WRC plus at 250 batting average, 198 ISO. They're not the best numbers in the world, but he's fine at his price tag. Although I will say Draftkings did price up pretty much the entire lineup, so it's not that easy to stack these guys up, but they are in an elite spot here versus Jorge Lopez. Then Josh Donaldson at 4,100. He's fine versus lefties and righties. I do prefer the lefties versus Dylan Cease, but if you're looking at Donaldson's numbers versus righties this season, they've been pretty good so far. It's a smaller sample size because he was injured for quite a bit, but a 16% walk rate, a 294 batting average, of 529 slugging, 375 on base percentage, and over a 200 ISO. So I think he's fine for the price tag, especially if you're stacking up the Twins. Then Rio Ruiz here at 3,800. You're getting a cheap lefty here versus Tuki Toussaint. And if you're looking at Toussaint's numbers versus lefties this season, over a 400 WOBA and a lot of fly balls as well with a double-digit walk rate. So I think Ruiz is fine here. Looking at his splits versus righties this season, over a 200 ISO, only a 21% fly ball rate, 21% strikeout rate, and the numbers are pretty weak with only a 206 batting average, but I think there's a decent chance he might be able to go deep here versus Toussaint. It's a great park for hitting, and Toussaint is a guy that has struggled with lefties this season, so I think Ruiz is fine, but I wouldn't say I'm in love with it. Then we have Alec Bohm, I apologize, I'm not sure how to say his name, but he is cheap, 2,800, and he has hit righties pretty well so far this season. Now, Pablo Lopez is worse versus lefties than he is versus righties, but I like the price point for the most part. I like where he's going to be hitting in the batting order, and if you're looking at his numbers versus righties this season, he's got a pretty impressive 352 batting average, so I think he's fine for the price point if you need a cheap option at third base. Then dropping down to shortstop, we have two options I like here. You can also throw in Jazz here as well, because he's also eligible at shortstop. But look, I like all the Braves here, so Dansby Swanson, I know he's super expensive, but if you got the money for him, I certainly have no issues with that. He's been great versus right-handed pitching this season with a 322 batting average, a 147 WRC plus, over a 200 ISO, and a near 400 WOBA. So I know it's not like a broken record here, but I love all the Braves here versus Jorge Lopez and the Orioles bullpen. Then Jorge Lopez here is just a lefty versus Dylan Cease, although I will say his price tag is a bit up there, and he's actually been better versus lefties this season. So if you're going to be spending up at shortstop, I would really just prefer to try to get to Dansby Swanson, because I do like the Braves offense much better than I like the Minnesota Twins. I mean, their implied team total is nearly a run higher, but if you can't get up to either of those guys, I think Jazz is fine at 3,200 as a lefty versus Vince Velasquez. Then we'll move on to the outfield, which is loaded with a lot of good spots here. Good guys, good options at the top of the price range. Good guys in the middle, and then we also have some really nice cheap options as well. But we'll start with Ronald Acuna at 6,000. He's going to be one of the top options on the slate. The problem is he is super expensive. If I'm spending it for anybody, I would prefer it to be Freddie Freeman. But if you got the money for Acuna, I have no issues with that at all. He's been great versus right-handed pitching this season with over a 400 ISO and near 500 WOBA, over a 700 slugging, and a 300 batting average. So yeah, if you got the money for Acuna, he's an elite option, but I do understand he is very, very pricey. Same goes for Marcell Ozuna. He's been better versus lefties this season, but that's not to say he's been bad versus righties in the slightest. Over a 300 batting average, over a 200 ISO, over a 500 slugging, and just overall very, very good numbers. So again, if you got the money for him, fantastic options, but I do realize they are very, very expensive. And if I prefer anybody on the Braves, it's going to be Freddie Freeman. And then going down to more of the mid-range, we have Max Kepler here at 4,600, leading off as a lefty versus Dylan Cease. And if you're looking at Kepler's numbers versus righties this season, they're pretty good. A near 300 ISO, a near 400 WOBA, 149 WRC plus, over a 550 slugging, and only an 18% strikeout rate. You guys know I love Max Kepler, so he's certainly playable for me on this slate as a lefty versus Dylan Cease. And Adam Duvall, 4,500. He's a bit expensive, and like I said, DK did do a pretty good job of pricing the entire Braves lineup. but I think Duvall is fine. If you're looking at his splits versus righties this year, he's got a 360 ISO, 620 slugging, only a 29% ground ball rate. He's keeping the ball in the air. He does strike out quite a bit, but I like the power upside, and Jorge Lopez is just not someone that really scares me too much. And I believe Duvall, doesn't he have like 2 triple-donger games so far this season? Which is just absolutely insane, so he definitely has the power upside. I think he is fine. Hits near the bottom of the order, but this lineup is absolutely loaded. Then some more of the cheaper options here. Corey Dickerson at 3,800. Like lefties here versus Vince Velasquez, and he's actually my favorite Miami Marlin on this slate. He's a bit pricey given the rest of the Marlins, but he's fine. He's always been good versus right-handed pitching, and Vince Velasquez is going to struggle with lefties. I think Corey Dickerson is certainly viable here. Only a 13% strikeout rate to right-handed pitching this season. Then Avasale Garcia at 3,300. I haven't mentioned any Milwaukee Brewers here, but Kim, he's going to be lefty on the mound. And Garcia's actually got some decent splits versus left-handed pitching this season, like a 371 batting average with over a 20% walk rate, over a 500 on base percentage, over a 200 ISO, and a 463 WOBA with a 190 WRC+. So he's been very good versus lefties this season, so I think Avasale is certainly fine here at 3,300, although I'm not that interested in the Milwaukee Brewers on this slate. They have Cedric Mullins here at 2,600. He's a projected bat leadoff here versus Touki Toussaint. He's going to be a lefty as well as he is a switch hitter. If you're looking at his numbers this season, they are pretty poor, but versus righties, he does have a 323 batting average. Now that comes with a 55% ground ball rate, so I'm not expecting much here, but if you need value, I don't hate Mullins at only 2,600. Then DJ Stewart, 2,400. He's probably one of my more favorite plays on this slate because if we're going to be spending up for some Braves bats and Trevor Bauer and Luzardo, we're going to need some value. And DJ Stewart at 2,400 is probably the best value play on the entire slate. Like, he doesn't hit for a high batting average, but if you're looking at his pop versus righties this season, they've been pretty good. A 471 ISO to righties, a 482 WOBA with over a 200 WRC plus and a 735 slugging. Batting average is only at 265, and he's got a 34% K rate, but look, I think there's a decent chance we can get a pretty cheap home run from DJ Stewart here. It's a great park for hitting. Toussaint has struggled with lefties this season, so I think DJ Stewart is probably one of the better plays on the entire slate. And if you need someone that's absolutely free, I do like Matt Joyce here at 2,000 as a cheap lefty hitting cleanup versus Vince Velasquez. If you're looking at his splits versus righties this season, he's got over a 400 on base percentage, a 267 batting average, and a 120 WRC plus. Super high strikeout rate, but look, he's free at 2,000, and he's actually in a pretty decent spot. So I think it's going to be pretty much it for the video, guys. I do apologize for no video yesterday, but like I said, you guys probably wouldn't have watched it anyway. But I do appreciate you watching this one if you are, and if you've made it to the very end. And if you guys want to check out my NFL content, I did put my Monday Night Football Core Plays video up this morning, so check that out if you want. We got NASCAR coming up this Saturday once again, so it's not going to interfere with our Football Sunday, which I love that NASCAR is having some of the races on Saturday night. Makes it perfect for the NFL starting. But that's pretty much going to be it for the video, guys. I appreciate you watching. Leave a like if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you guys in the next one.